Hi, we're here at Tesol Colombia I. It's June 6th, 2015, at the Universidad de la Sabana. My name is Carl Anderson. I'm a faculty member here at the Department of Foreign Languages and Cultures. I'm here with Amy Thompson from the University of South Florida. Amy has been talking to us just recently today about perceived positive language interaction. Could you tell us a bit about what that long string of complicated words is?
Yes, sure. So perceived positive language interaction is essentially the idea that it's an IMIC perspective of multilingualism that explains the concept when some multilinguals, not all multilinguals, perceive positive interactions between foreign languages studied, meaning if you've studied more than one foreign language, so not your first language, does one language help in some way the acquisition of subsequent languages? So that's essentially what it is.
And how did you get interested in this line of research? It seems very interesting, very 21st century, very oriented towards multilingualism, multiculturalism. How did you start working on this? What's the story?
Well, so as I just was saying in the keynote speech, it kind of started, as a lot of research does, by personal experience and personal interest. And I was telling the story about how when I was watching a movie in French and I was then trying to speak to a Spanish-speaking friend in Spanish, and I couldn't. And it was the first kind of time I had a concrete example of interactions of languages in a multilingual's mind, so my mind specifically at that time. And so then because of that, when I was doing some data collection in Brazil, I put a question on a questionnaire that says, if you've studied more than one foreign language in the past, has this helped or hindered your learning of subsequent languages? Please provide examples. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I would get anything. I didn't even know if people would answer the question. But then it turned out I got some intriguing answers from the Brazilian participants that actually came with some beautiful quantitative data analyses having to do with language learning aptitude. And since then, I've been exploring it in a variety of different contexts in a variety of different ways with a variety of different features.
Okay, and certainly, your work seems very relevant for us because many of our teachers here in Colombia often complain about low motivation levels in the students, and this seems related to the idea of, perceived positive interaction, attitude toward language learning, language use. How do you think that one could go about starting to put some of your ideas that have come out of research into practice, or what could some, our teachers who are out there, today in the classroom, start doing to make use of this kind of knowledge?
So at the very last part of the keynote, I was talking about how what I'm not sure is if this concept can be taught or if this is something that can be can only raise organically within a specific learner's mind. But one thing I do, I talk to I don't currently teach languages. Previously I taught ESL and EFL and French and Spanish, but now I just teach, I teach applied linguistics to graduate students primarily. Thinking about having them help their students, maybe be open to the idea that past experiences are helping you now. And I think in the case I asked the audience earlier this morning how many people had studied a language other than English, and I would say over 2/3 of the audience raised their hands. And so it seems like in Colombia there are people who study multiple languages, so perhaps kind of bringing into the discussion into the language classrooms of trying to bring these positive interactions between previous languages studied, and to then even some extent between studying grammar in the L1 if they're learning a first, second language. Of course, you have to be careful not to rely too heavily on the L1 when learning in L2 because you want to learn to think in the second language. But as adults, we have advanced cognitive skills that kids don't have, and we should definitely use these cognitive skills to help us in learning all the languages that we study.
I think that's actually a theme that we've heard from a number of presenters here, the value of, especially in the case of Spanish speakers in Colombia, of being able to use their first language, the native language Spanish, as a resource when they are learning a second language, especially a closely related language like English or French. So where do you see your research going now? What are the next steps? What are you interested in pursuing further in this line?
So one of the things, so primarily I've collected data in places where participants are inherently monolingual and then add languages kind of later in life, and like in the Brazilian context and the Turkish context. I've also collected data recently in the Swedish context, which our Swedish participants are patterning in ways that are quite different from previous participants because they're much more multilingual than other populations that I've studied. So I want to look a bit more at kind of these more inherently multilingual societies to see if this same construct would be applicable in other settings. I also want to look at I've looked at mostly individual differences, but I also want to, and also language proficiency, I've taken a look at in those things, but I want to look at maybe more things like speaking fluency, accuracy, influences with study abroad, other, things that are not necessarily related to individual differences or proficiency, which I've done a lot of already.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot more to look forward to in this line of work. Once again, Dr. Thompson, thank you for being with us here at Tesol Colombia I at the Universidad Samana on this lovely day in June. Thank you very much.